And welcome. This is Dr. Greg Cason for Off the Couch with Dr. Greg, where psychology meets everyday life. And I'm here with Brian Gomez, producer. Hey,
Happy
Brian.
Monday, you guys.
And also, Gus is the engineer, and he's on the board. Hi, Gus.
Hello.
All right.
You actually hear me this week.
So today on Off the Couch, we're going to do this. Some studies came out this week in psychology. One will answer the question, does looking younger give you better mental health? The most unexpected link to a rapid aging, something that you may be not expecting that'll make you older. Also, it's not just how you look, it's how you see things with your eyes. And the most unexpected beauty tip to slow aging. So we're keeping it practical here. And for psychology in the news, it's never too late to be a star or a starlet. That'll make more sense as we go. But first, America is getting older. According to the 2020 census, 1 in 6 people in the United States are over 65 years old. That's a total population of 55.8 million people, or 16.8% of the population. That's a lot of old people, huh, Brian?
Seems like it.
Oh, no.
I see them driving very slow.
Oh, well, I mean, that's I will count myself not perhaps over 65, but I am certainly sliding into home base very soon. Dramatic increase over the past 100 years. In 1920, only 4.7% of people were over the age of 65. And the population currently that is 95 and older grew to 631,000 in 2020. That's nearly a 50% growth rate from 2010. That's pretty amazing, isn't it?
That is. Is it from like the medical advancements?
Partially medical advancements, partially, better nutrition in some cases. We also know more about, how to prevent aging, and people are doing things like exercise and spending time together. We're going to go over some tips to really help people. But it's very exciting to me that, yes, our medical advancements are so much further along than they used to be. It's really an incredible thing in the science world, but we also know some things that will really help. Interesting to note that the country with the longest living population is actually Japan, according to the 2020 census. But this is very different. Actually, I looked, and it looks like Monaco, which is a relatively small country. A lot of people associate it with France. It is right by it, but it's its own country. They actually have technically the largest population. They have over 30% in Monaco, which makes a lot of sense to me, because that's a place, generally Monaco, that you move to, often because you're very wealthy and want to shelter your earnings. So so it makes sense that's actually the oldest place in the world. So Japan has the largest share. Otherwise, the United States is ranked way down there. We're 34th in the world of industrialized countries. So that's actually not so good. Our oldsters are it doesn't go quite as long. Many European countries and Canada have higher shares of older residents, and the smallest shares were actually in Russia and Cuba. Perhaps not a surprise, but surprising to me, the bottom was New Zealand. And, I was trying to guess why that might be. I don't have a good answer for that, because New Zealand, to me, is one of the most heavenly places in the entire world.
Yeah, that's why I'm surprised you said it was the last one. I would have not thought that at all.
It may have to do with reporting, who knows, but it may also have to do, there's a large native population. There's also a large population that's incarcerated. So I don't know if it's due to one of those populations or if it's due to something else. It's not a cheap place to live. It's because it is, a remote place to live. But it is an absolutely stunning place to live. And I don't think I've ever met anyone from New Zealand who wasn't absolutely amazing. They're an incredible people with an incredible culture. So It's kind of exciting. I also attended a workshop on working with older adults this weekend. And so I'm thinking, oh my goodness, all this research is coming out. I'm going to this workshop on working with older adults. And then some other things conspired to have us start to deal with this issue that we're going to talk about today. So we talked about the myths of normal aging, or we talked about aging and memory decline, I think a few podcasts ago. So I wanted to go over what are the myths of normal aging. It is a myth that people get depressed as they get older. There are actually some really real concrete reasons for it, so we want to be aware of it. It's a myth that people have cognitive decline. That's a little different than like forgetting something. It's more like you're starting not to be able to be the same person that you were in the past. It's a myth that you're in persistent or problematic pain. It's a myth that you have persistent grief, and it's a myth that you might have confusion. So if any of those things are present, then they would actually need to be evaluated. So often people fear aging because they fear one of those things. And one thing that was kind of interesting too to me, and Gus, if you could put this up, the cognitive changes, what declines with age. So if you are, I'll explain what this says, but this is for people who might be watching the video on YouTube. What declines with age are things like processing speed, divided attention, word retrieval, like what was that name? What was that place? Memory, we forget some things, of course. So the more time goes along, the more memory we forget. It's sort of like we only have so much room in our filing cabinet there. And executive functioning, that's sort of like your inhibitions, the things that stop you from doing things. It's being able to process things. It's executive functioning. I won't go into it, but it can be a lot of like higher level things. What improves with age? And I think we've talked about this in the past. Crystallized knowledge. That's your fund of information, things you've learned over the past, and that you can actually have this giant bank of information available to you and be able to make incredible decisions. So that's what's actually really rather interesting, and I think that puts together a lot of what we call wisdom. So we actually get wiser as we get older. That's not a myth. Also, verbal knowledge are again, knowing words for things, and also, how to call things and how to put things and remembering those kinds of things. Focused attention, we can stay on a task for longer, because divided attention we might think we're pretty good at, but often that goes away pretty fast. And where there's also been a lot of research that when you multitask, you aren't as efficient. But people who get older actually can focus on something for a longer period of time. But the most exciting thing to me was people get more creative. Creativity actually improves with age. Pretty exciting, huh?
Some good things to look forward to. Actual
huge good things. So that brought me to this study I found, which is probably one of the more interesting studies. I hate to keep saying that, but wow. Does trying to look younger make you feel younger? So we see people all the time. I see people all the time getting Botoxed and filled, and they're getting nipped and tucked, and they're getting, I don't know what's going on. They got all kinds of things going on, working out like dogs, all in dressing certain ways, all in the service of staying younger, all in the service of looking better. And here comes along this study to kind of answer this question. Does that do something? Does that work? Does that help? There's a new study from the University of Oklahoma and University of Michigan. It was published in the journal Psychology and Aging. And as a reminder, on the YouTube page, if you go to it under youtube.com/Dr. Greg, DRGREG, you can then link under the video. We'll have the links to all the articles if you want to read them yourself. In this article, 59% of U.S. adults 50 to 80 years old believe they look younger than other people their age. What do you think about that? 59% think they look younger than other people their age.
Well, it depends. Are they people in LA or in major cities? I think because a lot of people look different from major cities compared to like more, relaxed environments where there's not a lot of social pressures.
No, they looked all over the nation for this. This was a nationwide study, which was kind of interesting. I mean, yeah. So you're looking around, comparing yourself to other people, and you're thinking, I look a lot better than these people. 59% of the people do that. That means that can't actually be correct. I mean, come on, 59% can't look better than everybody else. That
I want to have that confidence.
Yeah. So, I mean, maybe there's a bit of delusion there. Maybe I'm suffering from that myself. What do you think?
That might be the key. The key to happiness. Delusion.
I think so, maybe. Only 6% of older adults say they look older than people their age. And it turns out these two statistics actually make a big difference. If you think you look younger than other people your age, that actually benefits you quite a bit. And if you think you look older than other people your age, that actually takes a toll. And we're going to get to what that is. The rest of the people, the other 36%, I guess, thought they looked about the same as their peers. Or maybe they're just modest, who knows? Looking younger, 1/3 of older Americans, 35%, 1 in 3 older Americans, and we're defining that as 50 or older, 35% have invested time or money toward the goal of looking younger. Pretty wild, huh? And I wonder, some of that is pretty easy to do, putting on lotions and potions and I don't know, the exercise.
Skincare industry is making money.
So I think that they probably don't count that. What were interesting are the people that do surgeries or something else.
And that's so common now. It is so common. I mean, in LA especially, I'm sure other big cities too, but it's so normal now.
Gus, I want to ask you about your parents because I think it's not fair, but it is an interesting thing to think about when you're, when you get older. Sometimes you do want to look a little bit younger. The people most likely to say they've done who've actually invested time and money are women, people with higher incomes, and people of Hispanic origin. How about that? Not all together as one person. Those are the three groups that seem to have invested the highest amount. The study was based on a national survey conducted for the University of Michigan, the National Poll on Healthy Aging. They also asked about people's positive experiences related to aging and ageism. So it's not only positive experiences related to aging, getting older, but positive experiences related to ageism or how other people are treating them regarding getting older. So positive experiences they asked about were things like advice, wisdom, and a strong sense of purpose. And negative experiences related to aging and ageism were things like seeing or hearing difficulties, memory issues, use of technology, and of course the ageism or some kind of discrimination or negative feelings toward people. The surprising finding, and as I said, it's the beliefs that really seem to make the difference, because those people who believed they looked younger than other people their age scored higher on positive age-related experiences and lower on negative age-related experiences. So people are making efforts to look younger and exercising and eating well and, trying to be as happy as they can, dressing well and going out and living life in a positive way. They probably are having more positive age-related experiences and lower negative age-related experiences. Those who said they had invested time or money into looking younger were more likely to score higher on the positive scale. So you put money in and you feel like it pays off a little bit. So those expensive creams that you get at Nordstrom or one of the other department stores can pay off psychologically. How about that? And, I used to know somebody, Brian, who was a plastic surgeon, and she said she would do Botox and that really people would just be absolutely thrilled and interact with people. And then I saw some research later, I'm sorry I don't have it now, that absolutely backed her up that sometimes people actually feel much better because they feel like they look better.
That makes sense. I mean, it's good for your mental health to feel good and about yourself, you know?
Yeah. So, I mean, let's not knock it. Especially true for those who are married or have a partner. So if you're married or have a partner and you feel like you look younger and you invest money in looking younger, you're going to be much happier.
Well, like, for example, don't you feel amazing after a haircut? I feel like guys and girls, anytime you leave the barbershop or the hair salon, there's something that just glows about you. Like, you feel like the man, no matter what. Like, you just feel so good when you leave the barbershop. I mean, as long as the haircut is good. But,
I have to go to your barbershop. I mean, I feel like it's good.
Like, you feel good.
But I don't feel the man.
You don't feel amazing?
No, I don't feel amazing. I just have sort of a haircut experience where it doesn't look bad anymore. Okay, so those who had invested in strategies to look younger were also more likely to score higher for negative experiences related to aging. So you can feel much better about yourself if you put money in it, but you can also, probably because you're putting focus on it. We know a phenomenon. You can also feel more negative experiences. So you have both more positive and negative. We have a phenomenon we know about that when you have like a pain, if you focus on the pain will get worse. This holds true for emotion as well. When you focus on the emotion gets worse. So one of the strategies we help people do is to be able to, if not distract from it, to be able to coexist with it in a different way. So in fact, that people aren't as focused on it in quite the same way. And we could talk about ways we do that. But the bottom line is, here it is once again, that when people focus on it, they do have more positives, but they also have more negatives. This was especially strong for Black and white respondents, by the way, but not for Hispanic. So the Hispanic population missed the, if they spend money, they don't have the negatives quite as badly. Those who say they look older than others their age were more likely to score higher on negative ageism experiences and lower on the age-related scale, the age-related experiences scale. So let's talk about that. So if they felt they looked older, they felt like they were more discriminated against. People, probably made comments, they overlooked them, etc. And they also experienced things like, we can go back to it, the visual difficulties, the pain difficulties, the kinds of things we tend to associate with getting older. So they tend to really focus on the negatives. Now, regarding health, those who had more positive and fewer negative experiences related to aging were also more likely to say they're in good or very good health. So both physical and mental. This is just underscoring what we talked about. But the physical was really interesting to me, that when you feel like you look good, you also feel good physically, not just mentally. And the higher the score on the positives, the more likely you're to say you're in good mental and physical health. So keep it up.
That makes sense too, though, because say for example, you keep complaining about getting older and you're not wanting to work out, or because you're feeling old or hurting, and then it's like a snowball effect that it just keeps happening.
It is like a snow. You're exactly right. And sometimes things change. I used to work out at this boot camp, Barry's boot camp, and the treadmill just destroyed my knees, and I had to stop doing treadmill. And treadmill are great for aerobic and also fat loss and just all kinds of things. So that was a huge loss, to have to do that. But I had to find other ways to work out. But I don't get that one benefit that I could get that I couldn't get anywhere else. So, we all have to make adjustments. Higher scores on the negative ageism experiences, the more likely you are to report fair or poor physical and mental health. So if you feel like, this goes again to that minority stress model that we've talked about in the past, that the more negative or prejudice one feels, and here it's feeling prejudiced about getting older, that you're going to have more mental health problems. How about that?
Your mind does really control a lot about how you live your life.
I think there's a constant feedback loop. I don't think it's just one way. I think it's just constant. We exist in a world, and when the world feeds us back a negative message, we can take on the negative message. To push back against that becomes very difficult. That's why we kind of need to be in this together as a human population. We need to work together to support each other to get better. Now, the researchers in the study acknowledge some bias, perhaps why looks and looking younger play such a big role. There is a pervasive bias against aging in the United States. We're especially bad here. We don't tend to hold up our older population quite as much. Maybe now that they become such a force, it's going to be a little bit different, but who knows? There's a specific bias also in the United States against admitting that one has done something to change your appearance, especially among men. So hush. Recommendations, they said, these probably everyone knows these: healthier eating, more physical activity, better sleep, stress reduction, oral hygiene, which I've talked about before. I think that's completely overlooked in the mental health world. Sunscreen, and reducing or eliminating tobacco, alcohol, and other drugs. That's no fun. Maybe reducing.
They said reducing.
So this parallels a different study. There was a 1986 study. I just thought this was cool, and this was from Dermatologic Clinics Journal in 1986. So yeah, I couldn't find the full article. I could only find the abstract, which is like a little paragraph discussion of it, that found elderly persons who look younger for their age are more likely to be optimistic, outgoing, and social.
Heck yeah, they're still having fun.
Yeah,
their body still works.
it.
Their mind still works. Like, I'd be enjoying it too if I was in good condition, and didn't have to really worry about much at that point in life. Yeah.
It was interesting to me because that leads us to another study I saw. This study said loneliness increases health deterioration. This was done by Amsterdam University Medical Center and the University of Glasgow in the UK. They analyzed 130 studies, and they found, so this is what we call a meta-analysis. It looked at a bunch of different studies and put the data together, that loneliness led to an increase in physical frailty, which in turn increases the risk of adverse health outcomes such as depression, falls, and cognitive decline. Remember, we talked about cognitive decline as not a normal part of aging, but here loneliness can actually lead to it. We also talked about depression as not a part of normal aging, but here loneliness again leads to it. So what does this tell us? Loneliness is not normal. So when we are putting people away in homes, or we're not coming to visit them, do you visit your grandparents or parents, Gus? No?
I unfortunately don't have any grandparents alive right now that I can visit. But I have like great aunts who I visit and say, yeah. So I do see. Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry to put you on the spot like that. My grandparents have all passed away as well, and that's sad. But now I realize the importance of why we visited them. And it really made me think again that I need to keep visiting my parents more than I do. And that would be a nice thing to do. And you too, Brian.
I know. Last year I told myself I was going to make it an effort to be more with my family and participate in family things and go home more often, for sure.
So this study that we're talking about from the University of Glasgow and Amsterdam University was published in the Lancet Health Longevity Journal. It's a Lancet Health Longevity. Researchers analyzed relationships between social functioning and physical frailty. And frailty refers to physical deterioration, things like weight loss, reduced walking speed, decrease in muscle strength. This might be a little bit different than like having arthritis, or something like that. This is like where it's a little bit of a failure to thrive. It's a little bit that they're not engaging with the world quite as much. Frailty, in turn, leads to a decrease in social contact because you're less mobile and you feel more vulnerable. The U.S. Surgeon General claimed that loneliness is just just as harmful as 15 cigarettes a day. So we really need to be aware that loneliness is a big problem. And coming out of the pandemic, when many people felt very lonely, I think we need to double down and help those who perhaps are lonely. And when we look at people who have successful aging, often they're very socially engaged, and that's an incredibly important thing. Okay, but it's not just how you look, it's how you see. And this is going to your eyes. First of all, I thought this study spoke to me because my mother just went through cataract surgery. Sorry, Mom, to give that out on air. But it was an important moment that I saw, because after she got this surgery, I saw her standing up straighter. She seemed more engaged. She seemed happier. She was interacting with the world. She didn't realize how much sight she had lost by having cataracts, and this surgery was incredibly successful in giving her her vision back in a really significant way. And I just thought that was the happiest thing to see, because she actually appeared happier and more engaged and just more energetic as a result. This study was done by Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine in Baltimore, and it's published in JAMA Ophthalmology. It's JAMA's Ophthalmology. It's their eye journal of the American Medical Association's eye journal. And it found that vision impairment in people 65 and older was associated with things like depression, anxiety, but the vision impairment was not associated with severe social isolation. So it won't lead people necessarily to pull away, but they will feel kind of bad about things.
I wonder how the hearing works into that, because that's a big part of being social and being able to understand and communicate.
Yeah, hearing loss is a big deal, and there's actually a lot of studies. I'm not talking about one of those studies, but I guess I could have looked for an older one, but there are many studies, and hearing loss can actually cause a great significant social isolation to happen. One, because people can't hear what's going on, so they can't engage with conversations, and two, because sometimes they mishear conversations or mishear things, so they actually can interpret what's going on as bad or negative or wrong, and it can often snowball in some significant negative ways. People who use hearing aids do often report more social engagement, so I do believe hearing loss is also extremely important to address. Okay, but that wasn't exactly what we're doing. This was a vision study, so I thought, this study was done. It was analyzing the National Health and Aging Trends Study in 2019 and 2021, so it was relatively recent. And they kind of came to the conclusion, just a basic one, that maintaining eye health should be a priority to everyone, especially those over 65, because, it brings on more negative mental health effects. So good to take care of your eyes, good to take care of your ears, get those addressed when necessary, just good to keep good physical health, good to keep people engaged. But that leads me to the coolest beauty tip that I found. This was kind of exciting. There was something associated with slowed aging that had nothing to do with diet, exercise, with even the social contact or doing any kind of surgeries or getting eyeglasses or getting hearing aids or anything like that. This was going to school, and this seemed like good news for me. This is found that participants in this Framingham heart study who achieved higher levels of education tended to age more slowly and went on to live longer lives than those who did not achieve upward educational mobility. They use this term, educational mobility. It's basically like they do a lot of compare and contrast to like parents and with siblings, and educational mobility is basically when the kid gets more education than perhaps their parents or siblings. So that's sort of one of the things they're very directly looking at. So this was according to a new study done by Columbia University, and this was published in JAMA Network Open. And this, again, more schooling seemed to slow the aging process. So let's talk about the Framingham Heart Study, because you're like, what's that? This is one of these giant studies. It was initiated in 1948. It currently spans 3 generations of people. Columbia University analysis was the first to connect the educational mobility piece with the pace of biological aging and mortality. And they found that people who have higher levels of education tend to live longer lives. In fact, 2 years of additional schooling translated to 2 to 3% slower pace of aging. That may not sound like much, but it's, let's say you go to college 4 years, you're going to have a 6% slower aging. Like compound interest with money in the bank, it adds up over time. So you're getting a slower pace of aging. So things really tend to help, and that it seems to be when you really do schooling, especially when you're younger, it really stimulates the brain and puts you on a very good path, a good glide path for the future. Columbia researchers used 14,106 Framingham Heart Study people they analyzed, spanning 3 generations, to link the children's educational attainment with that of their parents. And they used data from 3,101 participants who had provided blood samples to help calculate the pace of biological aging. So they look at a subset of people who gave the blood sample to see, hey, what's going on with that biological aging piece. The study looked at a lot of things. I mean, how much more or less education each person completed relative to their parents. They also looked at that relative to their siblings. They looked they saw that things are similar across generations. So it's not just that the next generation is necessarily doing better. It seemed to be that people, when they get more education than the previous generation, that really tends to make a significant difference. And siblings with higher education tend to have slower pace of aging. Siblings with higher education, tend to have a slower pace of aging as compared to the less educated siblings. It's funny, I got caught in my own reading there. But the bottom line is, siblings, if you go to school longer than your siblings, you're going to you do a little bit better. I do have one. I have a stepsister. I don't know that we can comparable biologically, but instead that she went and she has a doctorate in dentistry. But other siblings of mine have gone to college, graduated college, or maybe not gone all the way there. Not graduated, so I'm not going to compare myself to them. But if we're ever feeling competitive, we can pull that out. And it was interesting because I was going, gosh, I keep finding all these articles related to getting older. What's going on? Then I saw this article that was I think it was in Market Update or Market Insight or something, and I actually provided the link back to the original article, which is in a different website, but it was 60 is the new 30. The benefits of becoming a late blooming entrepreneur. Now, I think 60 is the new 30 is a little bit pushing it, but I thought it was a nice title nonetheless. And this article was about it's never too late to start a business or to start something. And I thought that title really intrigued me. And then I saw this news. Gus, can you put up the picture? I saw the news about Iris Apfel. And so Iris Apfel, Psychology in the News, and said geriatric starlet dies. Iris Apfel, Apfel, is a New York textile designer, socialite, and self-described geriatric starlet who became an unlikely fashion celebrity in her 80s for her outrageous style. She died March 1st in her home in Palm Beach, Florida. She was 102 years old. She was an unlikely star. Iris burst into the international fashion scene at 84 years old, long into her retirement from the textile industry. And basically, they tell this in a documentary about her, which I'll recommend. But basically, her story, I mean, several pieces of her wardrobe were exhibited at the Met, the Metropolitan Museum of Art's Costume Institute in New York City. And they were going to have an exhibit, and basically fell apart, and they didn't have a sponsor, and they didn't have anything. And she lived in New York City, and someone said, hey, you know, she's actually got a pretty cool collection of accessories. Maybe we can put her, you know, feature her stuff as part of, you know, just to throw something together for free. So the other exhibit had dropped out. Her friend told her about Iris. They had no budget. It was only word of mouth. But the word of mouth was runaway. It was one of their most successful shows ever, because her stuff was absolutely incredible. So here she is in her 80s. It was going to feature 5 outfits just to show her accessorizing. It grew to 82 of her outfits with more than 300 accessories. The show was named Rara Avis, or Rare Bird Selections from the Iris Beryl Apfel Collection. Beryl was her maiden name. And she's featured things like vintage designer outfits matched with outlandish costume jewelry, opulent antique Chinese robes adorned with flea market goods, luxury coats paired with feather boas and exotic trinkets. So you can imagine that this woman she didn't discriminate based on a designer or a label. She found what really intrigued her. So she had an amazing eye that didn't matter what the cost. It could cost 50 cents. And she even said she was in a costume jewelry store, and she found some costume jewelry, and it was like, I forget, $4 or something. And she said, I am so much happier with this than if my husband took me to Harry Winston, which is a diamond store, that took me to Harry Winston to buy a bracelet. So she really knew. It was the first time the Met had honored an individual who was not a fashion designer. She was an interior designer. She just had great taste. She had great quotes like, more is more and less is a bore. When you don't dress like everybody else, you don't have to think like everybody else. That's my favorite. And just because you get a certain number doesn't mean you have to roll up into a ball and wait for the Grim Reaper. She believed in getting out and living life. And I can't tell people how to have style. No amount of money can buy you style. It's just instinctive. You have to learn who you are first, and that's painful. So understanding who you are can really lead you to your style.
And it's cool because you can see that she knew exactly who she was, you know? Like, she radically, we talk about the concept of radical acceptance. She radically accepted herself. That means she sort of looked at herself as for exactly who she is, and she just accepted herself. She didn't always like it, but she radically accepted it. She doesn't believe in plastic surgery, and her husband, she had a larger nose, and her husband suggested a nose job, and she told him to go fly a kite, and he really liked her moxie. How about that? Her sudden fame, she just became suddenly famous because of this show at the Met. I mean, of course, it's at the Met, but all these incredible designers, all the word just was spread like flames within the fashion community. They all had to go see it. She appeared regularly on the style pages of New York Times after that, advertising campaigns for Kate Spade and Coach handbags. She collaborated with MAC Cosmetics. She did eyeglasses for iBobs. She had these characteristic round eyeglasses that she would wear. She did multiple clothing lines, including a Home Shopping Network collection. I think that's where you make the real money, is in the Home Shopping Network. And she was photographed by Bruce Weber for Italian Vogue. And in fact, it appears that Bruce Weber's actually
who's a very, very famous photographer, fashion photographer, it appeared that he was a friend of hers. She was really quite wonderful. There is a book she wrote called Iris Apfel, Accidental Icon, and there's a movie by the famed documentary maker Albert Maysles, who in 2014 entitled the movie Iris. The movie Iris I would highly recommend if you just want to feel good about who you are. And the movie Iris is really, I had you watch it, Brian. What did you think?
I thought it was cool. I loved how much her and her husband Carl loved each other.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you could just see how in love they were with each other. It was, I don't know, I thought that was kind of beautiful, and how he supported anything she wore, even like whenever she would dress him and everything. Like, it was just such a supportive guy to her that he just let her shine, you know?
That movie was also, I think, notable for aging, because she was 94 when they made that movie. He turned 100 during that movie. That's one of the scenes, in fact. And the filmmaker, who is Albert Maysles, was 87 when he made that movie. Albert Maysles did the famed documentary. He did that with his brother, Grey Gardens, if people know that.
You told me about it. Yeah.
Yeah, one of those iconic movies. And this is just an enjoyable look into someone's life. She lived life with gusto, and she loved fashion. And when you see fashion through her eyes, you love it too.
And it's cool. She kind of teaches you about like self-love within the documentary without even talking about it. You can just tell how much she loves herself and how secure she is with her style and the things she chooses to do, you know?
You know, this reminded me of another movie called The Eye Has to Travel. Do you remember this
exactly
movie? Do you remember
I'm blanking.
She was the editor of Vogue,
yeah.
But she was a bunch of different magazines. In fact, it was an absolutely amazing movie, The Eye Has to Travel, and both women were incredibly dynamic and really had an eye for things, but both seemed to embrace being exactly who you are. That seemed to be the key to beauty for both of these women, and they both were able to move mountains by understanding exactly who you are and really embracing who you are, and feeling, at least if you don't like who you are, maybe you don't like it, you accept it, you embrace it, you allow it to be. If you have a long neck, you have a long neck, and if you have a big nose, you go for it. Yeah, you accessorize it, you wear things, you do things, you call attention to it because that's who you are. And this is really counter to our society often today, where we often try to separate from who we are, and we try to make it known that we're just like everybody else. And I don't know, when I was in elementary school, I used to feel this way. I mean, I wanted jeans like everybody else, or I wanted different things. I wanted to be just like everybody else. But I think as you get older, you start to have your own identity, and you want to be who you are.
You stop caring as much too, I think, with the whole pressure of society too, which it was nice to see how free she was, just free to be who she wanted, wear what she wanted. And it's like items that we as society might look at her and be like, oh my God, what is she wearing? But it's like she just shined through it. Like, she wore it in such a way where it's like, whatever, as crazy as it might have been, you loved it. It was art on her.
She wore it like art, and she loved it. And what's so funny is there was one scene in the movie when her husband got a hat. It had metal studs in it. It was kind of funny. And she's like, is it too heavy for you? Because he's 100 wearing this hat in the back of the thing. She goes, is it too heavy for you? And he's like, oh, I'm getting used to it. And she said, you have to suffer for fashion. So...
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they were super cute together. It was a cute movie for sure. It makes you feel good.
Yeah.
It makes you like yourself and kind of look at yourself and be like, just accepting of yourself.
So if you are, having listened to this show, if you want to age better, maybe you can, the best advice of all the things I could tell you would be, in fact, to go watch that movie. I saw it on Amazon Prime. It's also on Apple. You have to pay for it unless you have a Prime membership. But it's a good look at successful aging, and it will help you to see that it's not just about what you look like, it's how you feel. And if you believe, like she put on these incredible outfits, that made her incredible to people. And I think that's what made her look good. Now, she even comments that, she understands she's got wrinkles and she's older, et cetera, but the life coming out of her just made her absolutely beautiful. So it's really one of the most wonderful things I can see. We can do all the research in the world, but then we see someone like that and it all goes out the window because she's living it. And if we can just live a few of her steps or walk a few steps in the road just like her, we're going to be much better as people.
I agree with that. Definitely. I'm a big believer of you look good, you feel good, you do good.
There you go. Yeah. That's it. Look good, feel good, do good. On that, we're going to wrap up the show for today. This is Dr. Brian. Oh, Dr. I guess Brian is he's going for that education. So you're going to slow your aging. Longer. There you go. This is Dr. Greg and Brian and Gus. Bye, Gus. Bidding you all farewell until next time. Be present, be flexible, and be kind.